She's the real mom figure, my son said, smiling so wide I almost thought it was for me. But the video kept playing, and I saw his arm, wrapped around Mariana, his wife's mother, as he raised his champagne glass in a toast. The camera panned across the backyard gold balloons, fairy lights, hired servers in white gloves passing flutes of Prosecco. There was a long table set under a rented canopy, overflowing with charcuterie boards and floral arrangements. And right in the center, a cake the size of a carry-on suitcase, 3 tiers deep, purple frosting, and the words Queen Mariana in gold script. I watched the video 3 times, once for the sting, twice for the silence. It was my birthday, the same date, every year, not a call, not even a text. I hadn't expected much, but I still refreshed my messages around noon. Nothing. Told myself they were busy, told myself it didn't matter. I made coffee, watered the houseplants, folded a towel that didn't need folding. Then I opened social media. Dean was tagged in 7 posts. In every one, he was laughing beside Mariana, sometimes holding her chair, sometimes handing her a gift bag. In one picture, the caption read, "So lucky to have this amazing woman in our lives. Thank you for being our rock, our queen, our mom." I didn't even recognize the woman holding the camera. I scrolled back just to be sure. Maybe they'd posted something for me earlier. A photo, a story, a comment. But no, the last message I had from Dean was from 3 weeks ago, asking if I could help Mariana's mother find a good physical therapist near her house. I stared at the cake in the photo again. He used to call me his queen when he was little. Back when birthdays meant pancakes and handmade cards and hugs that came first thing in the morning. I closed the screen, sat in the dark for a while. The card I bought myself was still propped on the counter. I hadn't opened it. It felt silly now, the way I'd signed it in cursive, pretending for a moment that it might have come from someone else. To the woman who never gave up, I'd written inside. I'd even picked one with raised gold edges and little watercolor wildflowers. The kind Dean used to choose when he was small and serious about things like that. I boiled water for coffee, but never poured it. Just stood there, watching steam disappear above the kettle. The house was quiet. Too quiet. After Frank died, it had always been just me and Dean. He was 7. He cried himself to sleep for months, curled into my side like a lost animal. I gave up everything, then every hour, every dollar, every plan I had that didn't involve him. I taught during the day, picked up tutoring in the evenings, and still managed to make pancakes in the shape of animals every Saturday. I packed his lunch through senior year. Paid for his college when the scholarship fell short. Sold my necklace to cover the dorm deposit. He never asked. I just did it. The first car A used Honda. I paid in full. The wedding I helped with the caterer when Mariana's family said they were tight that year. The down payment on their first house I signed over my CD early took the penalty. When Mariana had morning sickness, I delivered crackers and ginger soda to their doorstep before work. When she needed a ride home from physical therapy, I rearranged my whole week. But somehow, somewhere in all of that, I stopped being the center. Mariana was younger, flashier, good with Instagram captions and themed parties. The kind of woman who could make store-bought salad look curated. They started calling her mom in captions, in toasts, in laughter I only heard through someone else's phone. I wasn't angry, not yet, but something was beginning to shift. I walked over to the sink, looked out at the empty street and thought, I wonder what ocean air smells like in winter. For the last 8 birthdays, I've watched the same ritual play out: silence in the morning, vague promises by evening, a rain check that never gets cashed. Sometimes a card days later, sometimes nothing at all. I kept telling myself they were busy, that life was hectic, that next year would be different. My 60th still stings. Dean had planned to stop by with Mariana for lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches from the deli near my house. At the last minute, He called voice distracted, saying Mariana's yoga class had run late and they couldn't make it. "We'll come tomorrow," he said like it was no big deal. I ended up microwaving soup alone, the cake I'd baked for myself, untouched, until the next day, when I cut it into slices for the freezer. The next year, he sent flowers that arrived 2 days late, no card. The year after that, a text, "Happy birthday, love you," sent. At 11:57 p.m., when the day was already gone. I would smile, type back something kind, and tell myself it was better than nothing. I can't even remember the last time someone lit candles for me. I can, however, remember every detail of the parties they've thrown for Mariana balloon arches, rented venues, handwritten menus. I have liked the photos out of habit, a polite ghost hovering in their digital celebration. I used to think they forgot because they had too much on their plates. But this year, scrolling through months of reminders on my phone, I saw how easily they planned for everyone else. They never forgot, they chose not to remember me. The realization didn't come with an explosion, just a quiet settling inside me like dust after a room is emptied. I closed my calendar app, deleted the reminders I'd set for myself to call Dean, and hint about birthday. My hands were steady as I did it. I used to remember everyone's birthday. Every student, every year, even long after they graduated, I'd get notes. "You were the only one who remembered, Ms. Caulfield." They didn't know I kept a little notebook, decades old, with names and dates and favorite colors scribbled in the margins. That part of me didn't just disappear when I retired, but the calendar that used to fill with reminders now, it just sat blank. On my birthday this year, I checked my phone 3 times before noon, then again at 2. Still nothing. No call. Not even a voicemail that got cut off by accident. Dean always used to leave voicemails when he was little. Rambling, breathless ones. "Hi, Mom, I love you. I fed the cat. Bye." Now I'd be lucky to get a thumbs up emoji. By 3, I couldn't sit in the house anymore. I grabbed my coat and keys, locked the door, and started driving west. No plan. No destination. Just movement. The highway unwound in front of me like something soft. Something that didn't demand answers. It was nearly dusk when I reached the coast. The wind picked up as I stepped out of the car, and the scent of salt hit me so fast it knocked loose something in my chest. I wandered down a side street where the houses faced the ocean like they'd been waiting for someone. And there it was, peeling paint, driftwood fence, a weathered sign in the window. For sale, by owner. I stood on the porch, not sure why I felt calm instead of afraid. The house wasn't large, but I could already picture myself sitting on that porch with a mug of coffee and no one to explain myself to. No text to wait for. No approval to chase. I wrote down the number. The wind tugged at my sleeves as I walked back to the car. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt wide open. I called the number on the sign the next morning. My voice was steady as I introduced myself, even though my heart felt like it was running ahead of me. The owner, a man named Parker, said he'd been trying to sell for months and would be happy to show it that afternoon. By noon, I was back on the road, a folder of bank statements and retirement papers tucked under my arm. The cottage looked even smaller up close, but also warmer, like it belonged to someone who needed it as much as I did. The floors creaked. The kitchen smelled faintly of old wood, and the windows framed the ocean as if it were a living painting. Parker walked me through the rooms, talking about roof repairs and taxes. But all I could hear was the sound of waves behind his words. When he left me alone for a few minutes to feel the space, I stood in the living room and imagined my life folding itself into these walls mornings with coffee on the porch. Quiet evenings with a book. A place where I wasn't an afterthought. I didn't hesitate. I told him I wanted it. Back in my car, I opened the envelope that held my untouched retirement bonus, $70,000 I'd never mentioned to Dean money I'd saved from a career he'd always dismissed as just a school job. I signed the offer electronically that night, transferred the earnest money the next morning, and scheduled the closing for 2 weeks later. No posts, no announcement, no one to consult or placate. Just my name on the paperwork, my signature next to the deed. When the keys arrived in a small, padded envelope, I held them in my palm for a long time before slipping them into my coat pocket. The house was modest, but it was mine, completely mine. I locked my own front door that evening with a strange lightness in my chest. It was a Tuesday morning just after sunrise when I took the photo. I had made coffee in the blue mug Parker left behind, settled into the old Adirondack chair out front, and rested my feet in the cold, powdery sand. A book sat open on my lap, not because I was reading, but because I wanted to remember what stillness looked like. The moment felt simple, undisturbed, mine. I snapped the picture, no filters, no retakes. Just truth. Then I opened the social media app I barely used and typed a caption. Some chapters begin late, still worth reading. I didn't tag anyone, didn't check for likes. I closed the app, set my phone aside, and let the wind braid itself through my hair. By lunchtime, I had 4 missed calls. 2 from Dean. 1 from an unknown number I recognized as Mariana's office line. 1 from my sister, who never calls unless something's burning. I ignored them all. When I finally looked at the group chat, it was full of noise. Dean. Where are you, Mariana? Wait, did you move, Dean? Why didn't you tell us you were buying a house? Mariana, is this some kind of stunt? Dean, Mom. Seriously, are you okay? It kept going. Speculation, suspicion, even veiled irritation masked as concern. I scrolled without responding. They hadn't asked about my birthday. They hadn't asked how I was. Not for months. But one quiet photo had cracked the surface. Because I looked content. Because I wasn't explaining myself. Because I hadn't asked permission. I muted the thread and placed my phone face down on the table. Outside, the tide had come in closer. I could hear it pulling and releasing the shore like breath. I stood and walked toward it, feeling the wet sand settle beneath each step. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an answer. The invitation came as a group text 2 days after my post. Family dinner Thursday at 7. We need to talk. No greeting, no mention of my birthday, no explanation. Just a command disguised as an invitation. I stared at it for a long moment before typing a single word back, okay. On Thursday, I drove to the restaurant they'd chosen, a new upscale place in the center of town. Dean and Mariana were already seated at a corner table when I arrived, their menus propped up like shields. Dean stood, briefly gave a stiff half hug, then motioned for me to sit. Mariana smiled too brightly, eyes already sharp. We ordered food we barely touched. Conversation started polite weather traffic, the renovations at their house, then thinned to silence until Mariana finally leaned forward. So, this house, where did the money come from? Did you sell something? Dean jumped in before I could answer. Mom, you've been secretive for months. If you're trying to punish us for missing your birthday, this isn't the way to do it. His voice carried that practiced mix of frustration and authority he'd picked up from his father. I let the words hang. I sipped my water. The waiter cleared our plates without a word. Dessert arrived, a single slice of cake with 3 forks. Mariana pushed it toward me like an offering. We're just worried about you, she said. I set my fork down carefully and looked at them both. I used the bonus you never asked about, I said evenly, because you never asked about me. The clatter of Dean's fork against the plate was louder than I expected. Mariana blinked hard, her smile breaking. Dean opened his mouth, closed it again, and stared at the table. I finished the last sip of water, and folded my napkin onto the untouched dessert. Outside through the window, the streetlights had just flickered on, and my car keys were cool against my palm as I reached for them. The night after the dinner, I drove back to the cottage and sat at the small kitchen table until dawn. The envelope of old birthday cards spread out before me. I had kept them for years in a shoebox, thinking they were proof that once at least I had been remembered. Most were from Dean's childhood crayon drawings, misspelled words, stick figures of us holding hands. The last real card from him was 6 years old. After that, only texts. And now even those felt like afterthoughts. One by one, I sorted the cards. A small stack to keep just enough to remember who we once were. The rest went into a paper bag. I tied it shut and set it by the door for recycling. It didn't feel like throwing memories away. It felt like freeing them. In the quiet that followed, I opened my laptop and drafted a new will. The beach house would not pass to Dean or anyone who had treated me like a placeholder. Instead, it would become a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, a living tribute to the life I had spent guiding others toward their futures. I listed out the details with the same precision I once used for lesson plans, each clause another step away from the weight I'd been carrying. When I finished, I printed the draft and slid it into a manila folder marked Legacy. I placed it on the shelf above my desk, where I could see it every morning. For the first time in years, my life felt unhooked from their expectations. The air inside the cottage seemed lighter, the sound of the tide steadier. I made coffee, took it out to the porch, and watched gulls wheel over the water. Dean didn't text again. He showed up. I saw his car from the kitchen window, rented, not the SUV he usually drove. He parked crooked in the gravel like he wasn't sure if he should have come at all. I opened the door before he could knock. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't sit. Just stood in the middle of the living room, hands in his pockets, glancing around at the mismatched furniture and the old rug I'd found at a thrift shop in town. "You bought this place," he said. Just like that. "I did." He looked down, then back at me. "Why didn't you tell me I picked up my jacket from the hook by the door? Walk with me." The wind had picked up a little by the time we reached the shore, but the beach was empty. Just footprints and sea foam, and the wide sound of the ocean breathing in and out. We walked in silence for a few minutes before I stopped and turned to him. "I did tell you, Dean. For years. In every missed call, every changed plan. Every time I said, 'I'm fine,' and you didn't look up." He didn't argue. That surprised me. He just stared out at the horizon, like he was trying to find the words written somewhere on the water. "I never meant to make you feel—" He started, but didn't finish. "I know I said. That's part of the problem." We walked back without saying much else. I held the door open as he stepped inside, then waited while he grabbed his keys from the table. He paused like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. Just gave me a tight nod, the kind that stood in for a goodbye when you don't know how to say the real thing. I closed the door behind him. No anger, no shouting. Just the click of the latch and the soft settling of quiet. I sent the invitations by hand. No emails, no group texts, just small folded cards tucked into mailboxes. One to Loretta, who still baked bread every Sunday and had never once forgotten my birthday. 2 more to former students who lived nearby, now teachers themselves. A few to neighbors who always waved when I walked past, even if they didn't know my name yet. No one asked why. They just came. We kept it simple. No decorations, no centerpieces, no balloons floating with someone else's name. Just fresh coffee, banana bread, and a few old lawn chairs pulled onto the sand. Loretta brought a lemon tart, homemade with a flaky crust she insisted was still warm. I didn't tell her I didn't like lemon. I just smiled and took a small bite. The waves did the rest. We talked about everything but birthdays. One of the students told me about her new position at the community college. Another neighbor brought her dog, who promptly stole someone's sandwich and became the hero of the afternoon. There were no gifts, but someone brought a potted succulent wrapped in butcher paper. Someone else gave me a handwritten recipe for cold brew. Loretta slipped a card into my hand with a photo of us from 20 years ago taped inside. We both looked ridiculous and completely alive. There were no speeches, no candles, just laughter drifting into the sound of the sea. No one asked where my son was. No one needed to. I didn't check my phone all day. When I finally did that evening, there were no missed calls. I deleted the last reminder I had set in my calendar. Call Dean next week. It no longer applied. The sun was just beginning to lower, casting a pale orange across the porch, and the last few guests waved as they headed home, their footprints fading in the sand. I stood at the doorway and looked out at the ocean. I didn't need a party to be remembered. I just needed to remember myself first.